The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the factory hallway. A man in a faded grey janitor's uniform pushed a mop bucket, his movements slow and deliberate. The bucket's wheels squeaked against the polished concrete floor. "Watch where you're going, old man." Supervisor Rick Thompson stepped directly into the janitor's path. His cobalt blue polo shirt stretched tight across his chest. Two other supervisors flanked him, arms crossed. The janitor stopped. He kept his eyes down, gripping the mop handle. Water dripped from the strings onto Rick's steel-toed boots. "You got water on my shoes." Rick shoved the bucket hard. Dirty water sloshed onto the floor. "Clean it up." "With your shirt." Laughter echoed down the corridor. Workers passing by quickened their pace, eyes averted. The janitor bent down slowly, reaching for the mop. "I said your shirt." Rick's voice dropped lower. "You people need to learn your place." The janitor straightened. For just a moment his eyes met Rick's, sharp, calculating, burning with restrained intelligence. Then he looked away again. "Is there a problem here?" A woman's voice cut through the tension. Diane Moore stepped forward from the assembly line entrance. Her ivory work uniform bore grease stains. "He's just doing his job, Rick." Rick turned slowly. "This doesn't concern you, Moore. He's a person." Diane's hands trembled slightly, but her voice held steady. "Treat him like one." The hallway went silent. Rick's face reddened. The janitor watched Diane with something new in his expression, surprise, respect, and careful assessment. Rick stepped closer to Diane. "Get back to your station. Unless you want to join him mopping floors." Diane held her ground for 3 more seconds. Then she turned and walked away. Her footsteps echoed long after she disappeared. The janitor resumed mopping. But his mind was racing, calculating, recording every detail. This changed everything. 6 days earlier, Marcus Chen sat in his downtown penthouse overlooking the city skyline. The evening sun painted everything gold through floor-to-ceiling windows. His reflection stared back at him. Tailored charcoal suit, designer watch, the face of a man who'd built an empire. He wasn't born into this world. His father had worked factory floors for 30 years before saving enough to start Chen Manufacturing. Marcus inherited the dream at 25 when his father died. Now at 42, he owned 17 factories across 3 states. But something was broken. Quarterly reports showed declining morale and increasing complaints. Anonymous emails described discrimination, wage theft, and supervisors abusing power. His executive team blamed entitled workers and dismissed every concern. Marcus didn't believe them anymore. His assistant, Jennifer, entered with a folder. "The Wilson Street factory personnel files." As requested, Marcus opened it. Production numbers were strong, but turnover was catastrophic. Exit interviews revealed a pattern. Workers felt invisible, disrespected, targeted. Supervisors named repeatedly. Rick Thompson, Dave Morrison, Angela Hayes. "Schedule the undercover operation," Marcus said quietly. 2 weeks. Full immersion. Jennifer hesitated. "Sir, if anyone recognizes you—" "They won't." Marcus removed his watch. "My father started on factory floors. I need to see what he would see." Across the city, Diane Moore kissed her daughter Emma goodnight. Their apartment was small, 1 bedroom, peeling wallpaper, a window that wouldn't fully close. Diane slept on the couch. Emma got the bedroom. "Mama, when can we get a bigger place?" Emma was 7, her eyes too knowing for her age. "Soon, baby." Diane pulled the thin blanket higher. "Mama's working on it." After Emma fell asleep, Diane sat at the kitchen table with bills spread before her. Rent overdue, medical bills from Emma's asthma, electricity shut-off notice. Her factory wages barely covered food. She'd filed 3 HR complaints about Rick Thompson in 6 months, documented his racist comments, his targeting of Black and Latino workers, his threats. Every complaint vanished into bureaucratic silence. Tomorrow she'd go back. She'd endure, because Emma needed her. Diane pressed her palms against her eyes. Her mother's voice echoed from memory. "Stand up for what's right, even when it costs you." She was trying. God knows she was trying. Marcus's first day as Marcus Johnson janitor began at 6 a.m. The locker room smelled of industrial soap and old sweat. Workers changed clothes around him, talking and laughing. He was invisible already. The morning passed in observation. He mopped floors, emptied trash, watched the machinery of human hierarchy. Supervisors barked orders. Workers moved with exhausted efficiency. The building hummed with tension beneath its productivity. Lunch break arrived at noon. The cafeteria filled quickly. Metal tables, fluorescent lights, the smell of reheated food. Marcus sat alone in the corner with a sandwich from home. Rick Thompson entered with his supervisor crew. They surveyed the room like predators selecting prey. Rick's eyes landed on Marcus. Well. Rick walked over, his boots heavy on the linoleum. New guy. Where you from, Johnson? Marcus kept his voice soft, slightly rough. East Side, sir. Sir, Rick laughed. Hear that, boys? He's polite. He sat down uninvited. You know what this job requires? Knowing your place. Staying invisible. Think you can handle that? Yes, sir. Marcus took a small bite of his sandwich. Rick reached across and took it. You don't eat until I say you can eat. He dropped the sandwich on the floor. Oops, better clean that up. The cafeteria had gone quiet. 50 workers watched. Some looked away. Others stared with uncomfortable fascination. No one moved. Marcus started to stand. Rick pushed him back down. Janitors don't stand until supervisors say so. That's enough. Diane's voice rang clear across the cafeteria. She stood from her table, lunch tray in hand. Give him his food back, Rick. Rick turned slowly. Excuse me? You heard me. Diane walked closer. Her hands shook, but her chin stayed up. What you're doing is harassment. So I'm reporting this. Rick stood, towering over her. You're reporting me, you? He laughed, but the sound was ugly. Know how many complaints I've buried more. Know how untouchable I am. Doesn't make it right. Diane's voice dropped but didn't waver. Someone has to say something. Rick leaned close. You just made a big mistake, huge. Enjoy your job while it lasts. He walked away. His crew followed. The cafeteria slowly resumed its noise. Workers wouldn't meet Diane's eyes. Marcus picked up his sandwich from the floor. He looked at Diane with an expression she couldn't read. Intense, searching, grateful. You didn't have to do that. Yes, Diane said softly. I did. She returned to her table. Her appetite was gone. But something in her chest felt lighter. Marcus watched her for a long moment. Then he pulled out a small notebook from his pocket and wrote 3 words. Diane Moore, remember. The afternoon shift dragged like walking through water. Diane's hands moved automatically on the assembly line. Connect, tighten, check, release. Her mind replayed the cafeteria scene on an endless loop. Rick's face. The threat in his voice. The silence from 50 witnesses. Her supervisor, Angela Hayes, had pulled her aside after lunch. That was stupid, Moore, really stupid. No sympathy in her tone. Just a warning. Diane knew what came next. She'd seen it before. Workers who challenged Rick found their schedules cut. Their stations moved to the worst lines. Their every mistake documented. Some quit. Others were fired for manufactured reasons. She thought of Emma, the bills. The eviction notice she'd hidden in her purse. But when she closed her eyes, she saw the janitor's face. The resignation. The quiet humiliation. She saw her mother's face, too, from 20 years ago. Stand up, baby. Always stand up, the assembly line buzzed. Diane's hands kept moving. Her heart felt bruised but steady. Across the factory floor, Marcus emptied trash bins and watched everything. He'd photographed Rick's employee file from the break room bulletin board. He'd recorded 3 separate incidents of verbal abuse in 2 hours. The pattern was clear and systematic. But Diane Moore was the anomaly. In a workplace culture built on fear and silence, she'd spoken. She'd risked everything for a stranger she'd never met. Marcus had spent 17 years building his company. He'd hired executives, trusted reports, delegated authority. Somewhere in that delegation, He'd lost sight of his father's original vision, dignity for every person who walked through these doors. His father would be ashamed. Marcus was ashamed, but shame was fuel. He'd spent 3 days documenting evidence. Now he had a witness who didn't know she was a witness, a woman with courage and a target on her back. Marcus made a decision. The mission timeline just changed. Diane Moore wouldn't lose her job. Not if he could help it. He pulled out his phone, a cheap burner part of his cover, and texted Jennifer using a coded message, "Accelerate legal review." "Need protective measures ready." The factory whistle blew, shift ending. Workers streamed toward exits. Marcus shouldered his mop and walked slowly, still invisible, still watching. But something had ignited, and it was spreading. Marcus's father, David Chen, had arrived in America with $800 and a dream. He'd worked 3 factory jobs simultaneously, sleeping 4 hours a night, saving every penny. The American dream wasn't given. It was earned through bleeding hands and unwavering will. When David finally opened Chen Manufacturing, he'd gathered his 12 initial employees in a circle. Marcus remembered his father's words. "You are not workers. You are partners. You build this dream with me." David had known every employee's name, their children's names, their struggles. He'd paid above minimum wage, offered health care before it was common, created pathways for advancement. The factory thrived because people felt seen. Then David died suddenly. Heart attack at 59. Marcus inherited everything at 25. Too young, too inexperienced, too overwhelmed. He'd hired executives to help. Michael Bradford became COO, Harvard MBA, impressive resume, promises of exponential growth. Bradford brought in his team, Rick Thompson, Angela Hayes, others. They streamlined operations, cut costs, increased productivity. The numbers looked beautiful. But something essential had died. Marcus hadn't seen it. He'd been busy acquiring new factories, chasing growth, living in boardrooms and penthouses. He'd become exactly what his father feared, a CEO disconnected from the people who made everything possible. 6 months ago, an anonymous email arrived. "Your father would be ashamed of what this place has become." That sentence haunted Marcus. He'd started investigating. The deeper he dug, the uglier it became. Wage theft, discrimination, hostile work environment. Bradford and his supervisors had built an empire of fear. Marcus had fired Bradford 3 weeks ago. But the rot went deeper than one executive. Now mopping floors in his own factory, Marcus understood his father's wisdom. You couldn't lead from a penthouse. You had to walk the floors. Diane's story was different but parallel. Her mother, Gloria Moore, had been a union organizer in the 1980s. She'd fought for workers' rights until blacklisting forced her into lower-paying jobs. Gloria raised Diane alone, working 2 jobs, never complaining. "Baby, injustice depends on silence," Gloria had said. "The moment you speak up, you become dangerous to power." Gloria died when Diane was 23. Breast cancer. No health insurance. Died fighting. Diane had sworn to honor that legacy, but motherhood complicated everything. Emma came 3 years later, a blessing and a vulnerability. Emma's father left before she was born. Diane raised her alone, just like Gloria had raised Diane. Every choice became a calculation. Stand up for what's right versus keep your job to feed your daughter. Speak truth versus stay silent to pay rent. Courage versus survival. Today, Diane had chosen courage. Tonight, she'd face the consequences. She tucked Emma into bed, then sat on the couch with her phone. She opened the voice memo app and recorded everything from the cafeteria. Rick's words, the threats, witnesses present. She saved it to cloud storage with the date and time. If they fired her, she'd have evidence. Maybe it wouldn't matter. But Gloria's voice whispered, "Document everything. Truth is your weapon." Diane set the phone down. Exhaustion washed over her, but beneath the fatigue lived something fiercer, a refusal to be broken. Across the city, Marcus stood at his penthouse window. The factory was a distant light in the darkness. Two people inside it had just altered each other's destiny. Neither knew it yet, but the collision was coming, and it would change everything. Marcus arrived early the next morning before the first shift. The factory sat in pre-dawn darkness, only security lights glowing. He'd obtained a master key, easy when you owned the building. The administrative wing was silent. He moved past empty desks toward Rick Thompson's office. The door was locked, but Marcus had access to everything. Inside, he turned on his phone's flashlight. Rick's desk was meticulously organized. Files labeled by month, a computer humming in sleep mode. Marcus sat down and woke the screen. No password. Rick's arrogance made him careless. The email folder opened. Marcus scrolled quickly, photographing everything. Complaints about Rick from workers, dozens of them dating back 2 years. Every single one marked resolved, no action taken. Then Marcus found the folder labeled problem employees. His chest tightened. Diane Moore's file was thick. 3 formal HR complaints about Rick's behavior. Each complaint documented, detailed, and ignored. Worse than ignored. Notes from Angela Hayes, the HR supervisor. Moore is a troublemaker. Recommend termination. Awaiting justification. They'd been building a case against Diane for months, looking for any excuse to fire her. Yesterday's cafeteria incident was the justification they needed. Marcus photographed everything. Then he opened another folder. Wage adjustments. His hands stopped moving. The spreadsheet showed systematic wage theft. Workers' overtime hours logged, but paid at regular rates. Hundreds of employees affected. Thousands of dollars per person stolen monthly. The money redirected to supervisor bonuses. Rick Thompson had received $47,000 in bonuses last year. Money stolen from people like Diane. Marcus felt rage building. Cold, precise, surgical rage. This wasn't just bad management. This was criminal. He heard footsteps in the hallway. Security guard making rounds. Marcus quickly closed files, powered down the monitor, and slipped out through the side door. His heart pounded, but his mind calculated. He had evidence, but revealing himself now would alert Rick to destroy everything. Marcus needed more. He needed protected witnesses, corroborating testimony, and legal frameworks in place. The factory lights began flickering on. First shift arriving, Marcus changed into his janitor uniform in the locker room, transformed back into invisibility. But Diane Moore didn't know she was standing on a landmine. She didn't know Rick had already written her termination paperwork. She'd arrived today expecting normal retaliation, a bad schedule, extra scrutiny. She wouldn't expect to be fired. Marcus had to warn her somehow. But how do you warn someone without revealing who you are? How do you protect a witness who doesn't know she's a witness? The morning shift began. Workers filled the floor. Marcus pushed his cart past the assembly line and saw Diane at her station. She looked tired but determined, hands moving with practiced efficiency. Rick Thompson stood 20 feet away, watching her with a predator's patience. He held a manila folder. Marcus knew what was inside. The collision was coming. Marcus had maybe hours to prevent it. He pulled out his burner phone and texted Jennifer. Emergency legal intervention needed. Today. Details to follow. Then he did something risky. He pushed his cleaning cart past Diane's station and deliberately knocked over a bucket. Water splashed everywhere. I'm so sorry, Marcus said loudly enough for others to hear. He bent down to clean it, positioning himself close to Diane. Under his breath, almost a whisper, "They're going to fire you today." "Document everything." "Fight back." Diane's hands froze for a split second. She glanced at him, confused. But Marcus was already moving away, mopping frantically, playing the clumsy janitor. Rick was watching. Had he heard? Marcus couldn't tell. But the warning was delivered. Now everything depended on what Diane did next, and whether Marcus could move fast enough to save her job before Rick destroyed her life. Rick waited until 10 a.m., maximum audience. He walked across the factory floor with Angela Hayes and a security guard. Workers slowed their movements, sensing drama. "Diane Moore," Rick's voice carried across the machinery. "Step away from your station." Diane's stomach dropped. She stopped mid-assembly and turned. 50 pairs of eyes watched. "What's this about?" "You're being terminated." Effective immediately. Rick held up the manila folder. Insubordination, harassment of supervisory staff, and violation of workplace conduct policies. Diane's legs felt weak. "I didn't harass anyone. I defended someone from your harassment. That's not what witnesses say." Angela's voice was flat. "We have statements from multiple employees confirming you verbally attacked Mr. Thompson without provocation." "That's a lie." Diane looked around at the watching workers. "So you were all there yesterday, the cafeteria? You saw what he did." Silence. Workers looked away. Fear was tangible. If they spoke up, they'd be next. "You have 5 minutes to collect personal belongings," Rick said. "The security will escort you out." "I have rights." Diane's voice shook but held firm. "I'm filing a formal complaint." "I have evidence, recordings." Rick's expression flickered just for a moment. "Recording in the workplace without consent is illegal." "You just admitted to another fireable offense." The security guard stepped forward. Diane felt the walls closing in. Emma's face flashed in her mind. Rent, bills, everything collapsing. But Gloria's voice whispered, "Don't go quiet." "Everyone here knows what you are," Diane said clearly. "Everyone knows you steal from us, abuse us, target anyone who speaks up. Firing me doesn't erase that truth. It erases you." Rick smiled. "That's enough. Escort her out." The security guard, a middle-aged man named Carlos, looked uncomfortable, but he took Diane's arm gently. "Come on, Miss Moore, don't make this harder." Diane walked through the factory floor. Her legs moved automatically. Workers watched her leave in silence, some with sympathy, most with relief it wasn't them. Marcus watched from behind a forklift, hands gripping his mop handle. His phone was already out, texting Jennifer, "Termination just happened. Initiate emergency protocols immediately." Jennifer's response came instantly. "Legal team standing by." Recording everything. Marcus had surveillance cameras throughout the factory. His factory. Every word Rick spoke was documented. But Diane didn't know that. She thought she was alone, defeated, unemployed. She collected her small bag from her locker. Carlos waited by the door. Diane took one last look at the building where she'd worked for 3 years. Then she walked out into the afternoon sunlight. The door closed behind her with finality. Rick watched from the window, arms crossed. Victory on his face, but Marcus was already moving. The trap was set. Rick just didn't know he'd walked into it. Diane sat in her car in the parking lot for 20 minutes. She couldn't drive yet. Her hands shook too badly. The phone in her purse buzzed. Emma's school. She answered with a voice that didn't sound like hers. "Hello? Ms. Moore. Emma had an asthma attack during recess. She's okay now, but we need you to pick her up. I'll be right there." Diane hung up. She pressed her forehead against the steering wheel. The tears came finally. Hot, angry, helpless tears. She'd lost her job defending a stranger. Now Emma was sick. Rent was due in 5 days. They had maybe $300. The janitor's whispered warning echoed, "Document everything." Fight back, fight with what? Against who? Rick had power. She had nothing. But Gloria's voice cut through the despair. "You have truth." "And truth is patient." Diane wiped her eyes. She started the car and drove to Emma's school. Her daughter needed her. That was immediate. The rest would have to wait. Inside the factory, Marcus walked into Rick's office during the afternoon break. He knocked, deferential, invisible. "What do you want?" Rick didn't look up from his computer. "Cleaning, sir." "Trash pickup." Marcus pushed his cart inside. "Make it quick." Rick typed something, smiling to himself. Marcus moved methodically, emptying trash, wiping surfaces. His phone was recording everything in his pocket. He glanced at Rick's computer screen. An email to Angela Hayes Moore handled. Next target's Johnson, new janitor, potential troublemaker, and Santiago, union sympathizer. Building documentation now. Marcus's blood ran cold. Rick wasn't done. He was expanding his purge. And Marcus, the janitor, was already on the list. You done yet? Rick looked up suddenly. His eyes narrowed. You seem familiar. Have we met before? Marcus kept his voice soft. No, sir. First week here. Rick studied him for a long moment. Well, Johnson, word of advice. Keep your head down. Don't be like that Moore woman. Troublemakers don't last long. Yes, sir. Marcus backed out with his cart. In the hallway he pulled out his phone. His cover was compromised. Rick suspected something. Jennifer's text appeared. Legal says we need 48 hours minimum to file motion. Can you maintain cover? Marcus looked back at Rick's office. 2 more days of invisibility. 2 more days of watching injustice. Then the hammer would fall. But first Diane needed help. She didn't know it was coming. She was drowning right now alone. Marcus made a decision. He texted a number, his private attorney, expedite emergency assistance. Diane Moore, address attached, anonymously. Then he pushed his cart down the hallway. The factory hummed around him. Workers moved like parts in a machine. But somewhere outside these walls, a single mother was picking up her sick daughter, wondering how to survive. She wouldn't wonder much longer. Help was coming. Justice was coming, but the next 48 hours would test everyone. Rick Thompson was preparing his next move. Marcus was racing against time, and neither man knew the other's true identity yet. The collision was building. Impact was inevitable. Diane sat on her apartment couch at midnight. Emma slept in the bedroom. The eviction notice lay on the coffee table beside medical bills and Emma's inhaler. She'd applied to 7 jobs online. Her phone sat silent. No responses. No calls, nothing. The factory had been her lifeline for 3 years. Now it was gone. Rick Thompson had taken everything in 5 minutes, and nobody had stood up for her. Not one person. The apartment felt smaller. The walls pressed in. Diane picked up her phone and opened her bank account. $287.43. Rent was $950, due in 4 days. She thought about calling her aunt in Atlanta. Asking for money again. The shame of it burned. But what choice did she have? Gloria's photo sat on the bookshelf, smiling, strong, forever 41. What would you do, Mama? Diane whispered. The silence answered. You already know. Diane opened her phone's voice memos. She played yesterday's recording from the cafeteria. Rick's voice. You people need to learn your place. Her own voice. He's a person. Treat him like one. She had evidence. But evidence meant lawyers, courts, money she didn't have. Fighting meant risk. And she'd already lost everything. Diane closed her eyes. Exhaustion pulled at her. She could give up, move away, start over somewhere Rick Thompson's shadow didn't reach. But then Emma would grow up knowing her mother stayed silent. Knowing injustice won because speaking up cost too much. Diane sat up straighter. Her hands stopped shaking. Something hardened inside her. Not anger, but resolve. Gloria hadn't raised her to fold. Tomorrow she'd figure out how to fight. Tonight she'd rest. But the battle wasn't over. It was just beginning. Across the city, Marcus stood in his penthouse. The night skyline glittered. He held a glass of whiskey he hadn't touched. Surveillance footage from the factory played on his laptop. Diane being escorted out, her face composed but devastated. Rick Thompson's smile. Marcus had the power to fix everything instantly. One phone call, one revelation. But timing mattered. Revealing himself too soon would let Rick destroy evidence, claim ignorance, lawyer up. Jennifer's voice echoed from their earlier call. The legal team needs 48 hours to build the case. If we move now, Rick walks 48 hours, 2 days while Diane suffered. While she faced eviction, unemployment, desperation. His father would call this cowardice. His father would say justice delayed is justice denied. But Marcus was playing a longer game. He'd sent anonymous financial assistance, $5,000 to Diane's account untraceable. Enough for rent, bills, breathing room. She'd find it tomorrow morning. It wasn't enough. But it was something. Marcus set down his whiskey. The factory lights blinked in the distance. 2 days. Then everything would change. He just hoped Diane could hold on until then. Diane woke to her phone buzzing. A bank notification. Deposit received $5,000, but she sat up so fast she nearly dropped the phone. Her hands trembled as she opened the banking app. The money was real. Deposited at 2:47 a.m. Source anonymous donor. What? Diane whispered. She checked again, refreshed. The balance stayed. 5,287.40 thrice. Someone had helped her. But who? Why? Her mind raced through possibilities. Aunt, old friend, church group. But nobody knew her situation except Emma's school, and they didn't have this kind of money. Then she remembered the janitor's whispered warning. They're going to fire you today. Document everything. Fight back, he'd known. Somehow he'd known. But a janitor didn't have $5,000 to give away. Unless... Diane's thoughts scattered. It didn't matter who sent it. What mattered was Emma was safe. Rent was covered. They had breathing room. She wanted to cry from relief, but Gloria's voice steadied her. Accept the blessing. Then use it to fight. Diane made coffee and opened her laptop. She composed a detailed email to the State Labor Board. Dates, incidents, witnesses, Rick Thompson's systematic abuse. She attached her voice recordings, sent it before she could second-guess. Then she called an employment attorney whose number she'd found online. I'd like to file a wrongful termination suit. At the factory, Marcus arrived for his second-to-last day undercover. Rick was in rare form, confident, expansive, already targeting his next victims. Marcus watched him berate Miguel Santiago, a union sympathizer, for taking a 2-minute bathroom break. The crowd of workers shifted uncomfortably. Some made eye contact with Marcus now. Small nods. Recognition. During lunch, Marcus sat alone again. But this time 3 workers joined him. Carlos the security guard, an older woman named Beth, and a young man named Terrell. What you did for Diane was brave, Beth said quietly. Most people don't speak up. She spoke up, Marcus corrected. I just witnessed it. Yeah, and she got fired for it. Terrell's voice was bitter. That's what happens here. That's what always happens. Carlos leaned closer. Rick's planning something bigger. I heard him and Angela talking. They want to purge troublemakers before the quarterly review. You're on their list. Marcus nodded slowly. Then we need to move faster. Do you all have complaints? Documentation? They exchanged glances. Beth spoke first. Years of it. But what's the point? HR ignores everything. Not if we go external, Marcus said carefully. Labor board, attorneys, media if necessary. But we need witnesses willing to speak. Easy for you to say, Terrell muttered. You just got here. Some of us have families, bills, years invested in this place. So did Diane Moore, Marcus said. And she stood up anyway. Silence fell. And the weight of choice pressed down. Carlos finally spoke. I'll testify. I've got records from security logs. Every time Rick harassed someone, every complaint I filed that disappeared. Beth nodded. Me too. 23 years here. I'm done being afraid. Terrell hesitated, then, okay. Marcus felt something shift. The conspiracy of silence was cracking. He pulled out his phone. Give me your emails. I'm sending you contact information for an attorney. Tell them everything. As they wrote down their information, Marcus noticed Angela Hayes watching from across the cafeteria. Her expression was unreadable. Then she stood and walked away. Marcus's phone buzzed. Jennifer. Legal team ready. Filing begins 6 a.m. tomorrow. Your testimony key. Can you maintain cover 12 more hours? Marcus typed back, yes, but we have more witnesses now. This is bigger than we thought. Jennifer. Good. Rick Thompson won't know what hit him. Marcus looked at the 3 workers beside him. They didn't know he was their CEO. They just knew he'd helped Diane and was willing to fight. Sometimes that was enough. Sometimes that was everything. The emergency board meeting was scheduled for 9 a.m. Rick Thompson arrived early, confident. He'd been summoned by Jennifer Chen, the CEO's assistant. Something about operational review, probably more bureaucratic nonsense. Angela Hayes sat beside him in the conference room. Two other supervisors, Dave Morrison and Linda Grant, fidgeted nervously. None of them knew what was coming. The door opened. Jennifer entered, followed by 3 attorneys in sharp suits. Then workers began filing in. Carlos, Beth, Terrell, Miguel, and 15 others. They lined the walls. What is this? Rick stood. We don't meet with floor workers. Sit down, Mr. Thompson. Jennifer's voice was steel. This meeting is about you. The door opened again. Marcus Chen walked in, not in janitor clothes, in a tailored charcoal suit, burgundy tie, the unmistakable bearing of authority. Rick's face drained of color. This is Marcus Chen, CEO, owner. Marcus sat at the head of the table, his eyes locked on Rick. I've spent the last 2 weeks working undercover in my own factory, seeing what you've built in my absence. The room was silent. Angela's hands gripped her chair. Rick's mouth opened, but no sound came. You've been stealing, Marcus continued. His voice was calm but absolute. Wage theft from 217 employees over 18 months. $463,000 redirected to supervisor bonuses. Your personal take, $47,000. One attorney placed a thick folder on the table. Documentation, spreadsheets, bank records. You've created a hostile work environment, Marcus continued. Systematic discrimination, verbal abuse, retaliation against workers who file complaints. The evidence is extensive. A large screen descended from the ceiling. Video began playing. Surveillance footage from the cafeteria. Rick shoving the janitor, taking his food. You people need to learn your place. Diane's voice. He's a person. Treat him like one. Rick's response, you just made a big mistake, huge. The video continued. Rick's office. His conversation with Angela about problem employees, his email about expanding the purge, every damning word preserved. That's out of context, Rick stammered. I have 47 hours of footage, Marcus interrupted. All context included. Would you like to keep explaining? Angela spoke suddenly. I have something to say. Her voice shook. Rick forced me to bury complaints. I documented everything. I was afraid of losing my job, but I can't anymore. I'll testify. She slid a USB drive across the table. 2 years of buried HR complaints. Every worker he targeted. All the evidence you need, Rick turned on her. You traitor, enough. Marcus's voice cut like a blade. You're terminated. Effective immediately. Criminal charges will be filed for wage theft. Civil suits for discrimination and wrongful termination. Security will escort you out. 2 security guards entered, not Carlos. 2 external professionals Marcus had hired. Rick stood, his face purple. You can't do this. I'll sue. I'll destroy... With what? Marcus leaned forward. The money you stole? The credibility you lost? You're done, Rick. The guards took his arms. Rick struggled. This is illegal. I have rights. So you do, Marcus agreed. Exercise them in court. Rick was led out, still protesting. The door closed. The room exhaled collectively. Marcus turned to the remaining workers. You all showed courage. Some of you yesterday, some of you just now. Angela, you made the right choice. Angela wiped her eyes. I should have made it sooner. You made it when it mattered. Marcus stood. This factory is changing. Starting today, fair wages, real HR oversight, worker representation in management decisions. My father built this company on dignity. We're returning to that. Carlos stepped forward. What about Diane Moore? She lost everything defending you. Marcus smiled slightly. Diane Moore is on her way here right now. She doesn't know it yet, but her fight just ended very differently than she expected. Diane received the call at 10 a.m. Jennifer Chen, introducing herself as assistant to the CEO. "Ms. Moore, we'd like you to come to the factory immediately. There's been a development." Diane's attorney had warned her about intimidation tactics. "Am I being charged with something?" "Quite the opposite," Jennifer said warmly. "Please come. You'll want to hear this in person." Diane drove to the factory with Emma in the back seat. She wasn't leaving her daughter alone today. Not after everything. They walked through the front entrance, not the employee entrance, the executive entrance. Diane had never been here. Everything gleamed with polished surfaces and expensive art. Jennifer met them in the lobby. "Ms. Moore, thank you for coming." She smiled at Emma. "And who's this?" "My daughter, Emma." Diane's protective instincts flared. "Whatever you need to say it. We've been through enough. Follow me, please." Jennifer led them to the conference room. Marcus stood when they entered. The janitor. Except he wasn't the janitor. The man before her wore authority like a second skin. Diane stopped. I'm Marcus Chen," he said gently. "I own this company. I've been working undercover for 2 weeks, investigating reports of corruption. You saved me from humiliation without knowing who I was. More importantly, you stood up for what was right when it cost you everything." Diane couldn't speak. Her mind raced to catch up. Marcus gestured to a chair. "Please sit. Emma, there are cookies and juice on that table if you'd like." Emma looked at her mother. Diane nodded, still stunned. "Emma went to investigate the refreshments. Rick Thompson has been terminated," Marcus continued. "So have 3 other supervisors. Criminal charges are being filed for wage theft. Angela Hayes is cooperating fully. The entire system that allowed this to happen is being dismantled." "I don't understand," Diane managed. "Why didn't you just fire them immediately?" "I needed documentation, witnesses, evidence that would hold up in court. I couldn't risk them destroying everything and walking away." Marcus paused. "I know waiting cost you. That was wrong. I should have moved faster." "I received $5,000, Diane said slowly. "That was you?" "Emergency assistance. It should have been more. Which brings me to why you're here." Marcus slid a folder across the table. "I'm offering you a position, Vice President of Worker Relations. Your job would be restructuring HR, implementing worker protections and ensuring this never happens again." Diane opened the folder. The salary made her dizzy. $180,000 annually, plus benefits, plus a $2 million signing bonus as compensation for wrongful termination and emotional distress. $2 million, Diane whispered. "You risked everything for a stranger," Marcus said quietly. "You embodied the values my father built this company on. I want you leading the change." Diane looked at Emma happily eating cookies. She thought of Gloria. The years of struggle, the bills, the fear. This was real. This was justice. "Yes," Diane said. Her voice strengthened. "Yes, I accept." Marcus smiled and extended his hand. Diane shook it, not as a worker to a CEO, but as equals building something better. 6 months later, Diane walked through the factory floor in a royal blue blazer. Workers greeted her by name. Some stopped to ask questions. She listened to everyone. The changes were visible everywhere. New break rooms with comfortable furniture. Anonymous complaint boxes checked daily by external auditors. Worker representatives in monthly management meetings. Wages corrected, back pay distributed, dignity restored. Carlos had been promoted to head of security. Beth led the new Worker Advisory Council. Terrell was studying for his engineering degree, tuition paid by Chen Manufacturing. Angela Hayes had resigned but testified at Rick Thompson's trial. He'd been convicted of wage theft and sentenced to 18 months. Dave Morrison and Linda Grant took plea deals. Diane stopped at the spot where she'd defended Marcus 6 months ago. The hallway looked the same. But everything had changed. Emma was thriving. New apartment, stable home, asthma medication always available. She'd asked her mother recently, "Mama, why did you help that janitor?" Diane had knelt down. "Because it was right, baby. We don't look away when people hurt. We stand up. Even when it's scary. Especially when it's scary." In his office, Marcus watched Diane through the window. His father's photo sat on his desk. David Chen, factory worker turned entrepreneur, forever smiling. "I'm trying, Dad," Marcus whispered. "I'm trying to see people the way you did." Leadership wasn't about quarterly reports or profit margins. It was about recognizing the humanity in every person who walked through your doors. It was about understanding that titles were temporary, but character was permanent. Marcus had been invisible for 2 weeks. In that invisibility, he'd learned more than 17 years of board meetings had taught him. Power revealed itself in how you treated people who could do nothing for you. Justice required courage from unexpected places, and sometimes a single act of kindness could transform everything. Diane looked up at Marcus's office window. Their eyes met across the distance. She nodded once. He nodded back. Two people from different worlds connected by a moment of courage, building something better, together. The factory hummed with renewed purpose, and somewhere Gloria Moore and David Chen were smiling, because the measure of a person and a company lives in the space between power and compassion, and true transformation begins the moment someone refuses to look away.